The secure state line in Kingston rang like a warning bell from another world, a sound so rare it froze the room. And when Prime Minister Andrew Holness saw the name flashing on the screen, Wagadougou, his pulse quickened, because this was not a neighbor, not a Caribbean ally calling with congratulations, but Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier president of Burkina Faso, whose rise had shaken Africa, and whose voice now cut across oceans with words that began in warmth but quickly hardened into steel, congratulating the Jamaican people for their trust in their leader before dropping the weight of his warning. Wolves were already circling, cloaked in the papers of partnership, contracts that promised jobs while burying chains in the fine print. Ministers who might already be compromised, their loyalty quietly sold to foreign interests. Imagine being in Holness's chair, champagne still chilled, flowers still fresh from victory, and suddenly hearing from Africa that your celebration is already under siege. And as he listened, the Prime Minister felt the room shrink around him. Because Traoré was not speaking theory, he was speaking history. Scars carved into African soil where aid became chains, loans bled nations dry, and GMO seeds once praised as miracles turned proud cotton industries into rubble. Andrew, Traoré pressed, his voice low and urgent. Victory sours quickly if you do not break the old ways. I have seen it too many times. The people cry for wages that give dignity, for leaders who do not bow, and if you do not stamp on corruption, it will stamp on you. And Holness tried to protest that Jamaica had partners, lifelines, aid, but the Burkina president's reply cracked like thunder. Aid does not free you. It feeds dependency. Look at Africa. Our cities starved while our lands were rich, and the same system now reaches for your bauxite, your ports. I have documents cables drafted in European boardrooms with your nation's name carved into them, agreements that speak of carving your resources for loans that chain you tighter, not free you. And Holness, shaken, opened the glossy proposal already on his desk. Renewable Horizons Limited, a project packaged in solar farms and infrastructure promises. But in the fine print, his eyes froze on the words that confirmed Traoré's warning: exclusive extraction rights for a minimum of 20 years. A clause signed not in Kingston, but abroad. And as the pen slipped from his fingers and the flowers in his office began to look like funeral wreaths, the realization dawned that betrayal was not just outside his doors, but inside his cabinet. And Traoré's voice pressed further. One of your own ministers helped draft this deal. Andrew, the rod is already in your house, and if you bury it quietly, the others will bury the truth with it. Your people must see corruption unmasked, or they will never believe you fought for them. And so Holness sat through his first cabinet meeting after re-election with new eyes, watching the eyes, watching the guilty squirm under the weight of silence, a trembling water glass, a sheen of sweat. A pen nervously dropped, and though he adjourned quickly, he knew the betrayal was alive, sitting across from him, breathing. And that night he called Traoré again, whispering, "You were right. I saw it with my own eyes. But if I expose him, I risk tearing my government apart." And the Burkinabe's reply was relentless. Leadership is not about balance. It is about breaking the scales that were rigged against your people. Expose him in the light, or the shadows will consume you. And 2 days later, under bright lights and live cameras, Holness stood before his people with the cursed proposal in hand, his voice steady but sharp as steel, declaring, "This document promised development but hid theft. It would have surrendered our minerals, our sovereignty for 20 years. And one of my own ministers betrayed you to sign it." And the shock ripped across Jamaica like thunder. Ministers pale under the cameras, reporters scribbling, and one man, the guilty, turning ghostly white as the mask cracked in public. While across the ocean, Traoré watched the broadcast with a rare smile, whispering, "Good, he has chosen truth." Even as in Paris and London fury erupted, officials slamming tables, snarling that if Jamaica joined Africa in defiance, their grip slipped further, cables dispatched, quiet punishments prepared, because the quiet war had begun. But in Kingston, the streets roared with fire, flags waving, Bob Marley's words reborn. As an anthem of resistance, taxi drivers honking, vendors shouting, "No more chains, Jamaica first." And suddenly, what began as a private phone call had become a public movement. Yet with it came tremors. Markets rattled, credit warnings issued, whispers of investor flight, supermarkets raising prices. But instead of blaming their prime minister, Jamaicans rallied tighter, saying, "Better hunger with dignity than bread with chains." Fishermen in Port Royal, mothers in Spanish Town, youth in Montego Bay demanding sovereignty over dependency, churches and unions uniting civil society. Awakened, and Holness realized his re-election had only been the prelude, that his true test had begun. Because exposing one contract had pulled back the curtain on an entire system of exploitation. And now both his enemies within and empires abroad had seen him draw a line. And the question that hung heavy over Kingston, Wagadougou, Paris, and Washington alike was whether Jamaica could hold that line, whether Holness would be crushed by the weight of betrayal or rise alongside leaders like Traoré, igniting a fire of sovereignty stretching from the Caribbean to Africa. A fire that no empire could smother once it had begun to burn.